Okay, so again, I'm really hoping I don't have any more sound issues today, but going through demand and supply. So let's get started. So let's get our graph going here. So a demand curve looks like this. There are different there's different ideas like the steepness of a curve, but this is the direction of a demand curve. Okay, and here we've got, whoops, no, I just already screwed it up. Oh, whoop, no, there, okay. So this is price and this is quantity. So in general, right, as price increases, demand is going to diminish, right? So as price increases, demand, or the quantity demanded, goes down. As the price decreases, you can see as we go this way, right, quantity goes up. Quantity demanded goes up. All right, so yeah, that just makes sense, right? Because the cheaper something is, in general, the cheaper something is, the more people are willing to buy it, right? And the more expensive something is, the fewer people are going to buy, or the fewer in terms of quantity that people are going to buy. All right. So, as I said, we'll go on a little bit later about what makes the demand curve steep, what makes it flatten out, those kinds of things. Right now, though, we're going to talk about shifts in demand. You'll see this in the note, but I'll just go over it, as a with my voice. I guess is what I'm saying. So a shift is a movement either left or right that I think it's called a transposition in math. I could be wrong about that, but it's not just a it doesn't change the steepness of the curve. All it does is it moves it all the same portions to the right or to the left. I'm pretty sure it's a transposition. Maybe it's a transformation, but I think that's when you flip things. Anyway, but yeah, so you're still going to have the same shape to the curve. It's just going to be shifted to the right. Now, what does that mean? That means that, if it's an increase, if you shift to the right, that means that at every price level, right, more is going to be demanded than before. Okay, so a shift to the right means increased demands all across the board. So basically, companies can charge more. So how do you get that? Where does that come from? So any kind of increase in disposable income, so that could be through lower taxes, increase wages, increase work hours, right? Anything like that can increase disposable income. And if it's widespread, so for instance, if minimum wage was to increase, then demand would increase. That's the idea, because you'd have more disposable income. If taxes were lowered in your tax bracket, same kind of thing. But as individuals, it would change your demand, but not the aggregate or the demand for the entire market wouldn't go up. So that's one thing. All right. So the next thing is a change, and I'm going to change his delta here. So that triangle, I would sure you see that in chemistry. Anyway, whatever. So a change in the future availability of a product will increase demand on a product. So for instance, think about the beginning of the pandemic. You had toilet paper, which quickly became not scarce. That is not a good, that's supposed to be, looks like an avocado sitting on a cylinder of some sort. I don't really know what I was doing there, but that's supposed to be a roll of toilet paper. I really should, it's rounding out this bottom part would really help. Anyway, stop doing that. So when toilet paper, when it looked like toilet paper was going to be scarce, especially in the near future, people bought it in large quantities. Some people were selling it then on like kind of the black market out of the back of their car in parking lots, and so people were willing to pay more. People were were willing to pay regular price or premium prices for things like hand sanitizer and even the toilet paper. If you're like a 2-ply family, or suddenly it was okay to be a 3-ply family, even if it cost you, 50% more, because the future seemed like it was uncertain for how much is going to be available. Okay, and then the last thing would be a change in a competitor's product. So, for instance, if let's say in this case, you like a certain brand of what was I just thinking? Some kind of food, like some brand of chips or something like that. And the one brand you like stays the same, and another brand you kind of like as well changes its recipe, and the chips are not as good. They change the taste of them. You're going to increase your demand for the competition that you prefer. So if you like, I wish there's, if you like Sun Chips, let's say you like Sun Chips and you like Doritos, and they change the flavor of the Doritos you like. You don't really like that flavor nearly as much as the old one, but you still like Sun Chips, you're probably going to buy more Sun Chips. So your demand for Sun Chips is going to go up. And if it's, strong enough, it's going to go up across the board. This happened with like Coke and New Coke back in the 80s when they changed the flavoring of Coke. It caused an increased demand for other soft drinks and lowered the demand for Coke. New Coke anyway. All right, so what can do the other way? What can it would be? So these are all increase in demand. So what causes a decrease in demand? Well, a decrease in demand can be through PR, so bad PR. So a company that that makes some kind of public mistake, their CEO makes a public mistake. They are exposed with some kind of mistreatment of some group of people, or something like that. I think back to when the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, especially in the States. Starbucks got into the middle of that by discriminating against I think it was black employees, or maybe it was black customers. There was an incident in one of their stores in Philadelphia or something like that. Anyway, it caused a backlash against Starbucks. Also, in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, Nike took a big hit for child labor practices and sweatshops, because that's where Nike makes all its stuff. That hasn't changed. It's just, I guess, we don't care anymore. But that was a big thing in the 80s and 90s. And Nike took a big hit in terms of their demand. However, the competitors who made clothing in the same area, like Adidas, went up, which is funny because people wanted to beat on Nike and not on the other ones. But that was again a Nike thing. There's lots of things. Even Elon Musk, every time he was on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple years ago, and it seemed like I think he smoked some weed on the thing or something like that. And as soon as he did that, shares in Tesla went down because people were like, "Oh, what was this guy doing?" Same thing when anytime he says anything that makes him sound like a maniac, it can affect Tesla stock. All right. So next one is decrease in disposable income. Okay, so a decrease in disposable income. So this is where, right now in the pandemic, a lot of people are working less or not working at all. So they have less money to spend on things. So it's going to drive demand down for various goods, especially ones that are not that are luxury goods. So things you don't need for survival. That's going to drive the demand down for that. If the price lowers of a competitor, so if you're not a hardcore fan of any type of phone, let's say you have an Apple, you have an iPhone, and then the competitor Samsung drops the price of their phones, then you might be willing to switch phones on your next upgrade because it's cheaper, right? So the lowering of price of a competitor. And then the same idea that the change in the future availability, again, I'm not spelling that whole word, that was a disaster last time. So if you think that the price in the future will go down, right? The price in the future will go down, then you're willing to wait. And so demand will go down in the short run for that product. So a good example of that would be when you have, like, for cars and for phones, for people that are patient and they don't care about getting the latest phone, the latest car, and they're willing to wait, a year to catch them, like a year late. So if you were getting a 2021 car and you didn't get it in 2020 when they come out, and you waited until 2021 to get a 2000, I know this is confusing, but that's the way car models go. You would save money because as soon as they release the latest car, the last cars have sales on to get them off the lots. Same thing with electronics. The newest phone will drive the price down of old phones. Newest, iPad, newest Pixel, newest whatever, right? Drives the price down of the older ones. So if you're willing to wait on that, then it's going to drive demand down. Overall, it's just why they make it, as interesting as possible to get the latest gadget and that kind of stuff, because they want you to pay the premium price and not wait overall. All right. So, well, actually, why am I even thinking? So this one, for instance, if anybody bought a PS5 right now, if you're buying a PS5 right now, you're paying premium price. If you're willing to stick with something else for a while, eventually the PS5 is going to go down in price. Eventually it will. If you're willing to wait that out, the amount of people that are willing to wait is going to affect demand on that product. Okay, moving to the opposite side, moving to supply. Okay, so demand, right? Demand looks like that. So supply looks like that, right? So we still have price, we still have quantity. So the opposite, so at this end and at this end, so the higher price, right, is going to result in, sorry, that's P1, P2. Okay, so at the, wait, what did I do? Q1, wow. So at this quantity, Q1, right, this is the amount that companies are willing to supply at this price point. So they're not making a whole lot of money. Maybe, there's a bunch of other things that intersect in here with these graphs. But if they're not making a lot of money, they're not going to produce a whole lot of the good. That just makes sense. The higher the price goes, the more they're willing to produce because the more money they're going to make. Okay, that just makes sense. The more expensive something is, the more companies are willing to produce. And then what causes shifts? So a right shift in supply, so this way, right? So that's increasing supply all along every price point. That would be a change in tech that increases productivity or makes it cheaper. Okay, so the cheaper it is to manufacture things, the more they're going to produce them, because that will increase their profits, because the profit margin gets higher. Think about, in terms of that one, think about things with batteries. So electric batteries, ones that go in electric cars, and stuff, they're getting cheaper to produce. So that means they're going to produce more of them because they can make more money off them. It also drives the price down eventually, but this is just in terms of supply. The other thing is, if it's cheaper or there's an increase in the supply of raw materials, so whatever they make it, so materials, So, for instance, cobalt is used to make the batteries for electric cars and stuff like that. If it is cheaper to produce, which usually means they pay the people that mine it less, or they find more of it, so there's more supply of it, they're going to supply more because, again, if it's easier to get, it's cheaper to get, that kind of thing. So you can kind of see where this is going in terms of if a decrease across the board in supply. So what is that? Okay, so it becomes, this is a decrease in raw materials, or it becomes more expensive. So for instance, in terms of oil, it's really easy to set up an oil rig on land with lots of access to roads and infrastructure to pump it out of there, maybe have pipelines. But if you're going to set up a whole new oil rig offshore, that's more expensive. They're less willing to do that at lower prices because of the extreme cost of setting that up. Also, a decrease in production efficiency. Okay, so if it becomes more complex to build something, or for whatever reason, maybe there's a shortage of skilled labor in that area, that's going to cause an overall decrease in supply. Again, it's tied to the price, the marginal price of making something. So that just means that how much is it to produce that one extra unit of goods, right? And that's critical in terms of economics and what's to be produced in a marketplace. So putting those together, so price, quantity, so demand is there and supply is there. So companies want to produce up here. Hold on. What am I doing here? Okay, so sorry. I gotta label these things where I get mixed up sometimes. So companies want to produce up here. That's where a company would really love to produce. But as you can see, this is where the demand is going to be at that same price point, right? So you've got this big gap between the two, and that's going to be a lot of loss for the company because they're not going to sell. They're going to have too big an inventory. Think of your Canadian history, your roaring 20s. They built tons of cars and radios, and people didn't buy them, right? So they had large amounts of inventory. It caused and made the Depression worse. Now, at the other point of this, right, companies at this price, so this is P1, Q1. So at P1, companies are only willing to produce this much. But you can see the demand is way up here, right? That's where customers would love to have, wait, did we do that right? Yeah. That's where customers would really like, no, what am I doing? Did I get myself backwards? Yeah, sorry. As the, what am I doing here? That's totally lost my train of thought. As the price is lower, right? So this is, oh my gosh, that's what's going on. All right, so supply, wow. As the price is lower, the amount that companies are willing to produce is small because they're not making money or they're losing money. Later on, there'll be a straight line across this, right? And that'll be the idea of where marginal cost becomes unprofitable. But that's coming up. Basically, though, at the lower end, right, companies don't want to produce there. People will demand there, but it's not going to happen because companies aren't making money. So as we go along both of these curves, we eventually hit what is called the equilibrium, right? So I just call it QE and PE. So this is where companies and people come together and agree on a price and a supply. So companies are willing to produce so many, and consumers are willing to buy that same amount. And so you have an equilibrium in the market where there isn't a deficit in supply. So that means that inventories don't grow. there's also isn't a deficit in demand where inventories aren't going to if you have a deficit in supply, that means the demand is higher than the amount supplied. If you have a deficit in demand, you're going to have more supplied than is demanded. All right, so you'll see that a new product comes out. If it's really popular, it flies off the shelves. Again, look at PS5, I guess. I think they're hard to get. That would be on purpose in a way, but so that's a deficit in supply. There's a higher demand. Now take a product that's come out, and can't even think of something like this, but maybe a new flavor of something, and it bombs, and then stores eventually cut the price because nobody wants to buy them at the current price. So that ends up being an inventory problem and an increase too much supply. So it's a delicate game, and this equilibrium is not something that is known where it is. And the market doesn't just sit at equilibrium, it will move based on all these factors that surround it. So anyway, that is a basic overlook of demand and supply and how those things interact with each other. All right, hope you learned something. I will be back later on.